Okay, good morning, good morning. What do we have? Good morning, everybody. I see the Banhammers with us, fishing golf, both Danny's and my mother-in-law. Good to see you guys. Good morning. Let's do this. Probably enough intro for this morning. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so, good morning too. I'm going down to the farm today, spend some time with the family, and I am very much looking forward to that. Tim and Rhonda are going to be down there, mom and dad, and get in the pool. Maybe shoot some turtles. Who knows? Could be could be magic. So. What are we talking about this morning? Okay. Admittedly, it's been a tough week for the show because it's been a slow news week. There's some stuff going on that's a little higher level and difficult to cover in a half-hour show. But this one, I was digging through all the news stories. I spent an hour reading weird news stories. UFO debris washed up on the beach. Some dude got arrested for sprinkling cocaine on a police officer's head. A bunch of weird crime stuff. Decade-old hooker murder solved in Florida after they finally. So there was a story in Florida where apparently there was a hooker murdered, and the pimp went to the police and said, "Hey, my hooker was murdered. Here's all the information you need to solve the crime." And the cop said, "Yeah, but you're a pimp, so we don't care." And they finally took his information, and oh shit, they caught the bad guy who wasn't the. I mean, I'm not saying the pimp was a good guy, but he wasn't the murderer. I bet there's a lot of hookers out there that are looking at that story and saying, "Huh, I wish my pimp loved me like that." But I came across this, and there's some buzz on Twitter that's amusing. But here's the story. Michigan AG charges 16 GOP activists who falsely claim to be electors in bid to aid Trump. Now, there was a thing that was part of the whole 2020 cycle where a few states posited the use of alternative elector slates, and there was concern there. The alternative elector slates, there's precedent, there's legal precedent for that. It's been done before. It has been established that the vice president had the authority to say, no, these are the legitimate electors, these are not. And in a way he did, because he was presented with two sets of electors and he chose one of the sets. Now, in each case, he chose the original set and not the alternative, but that doesn't change the fact of the precedents existing for the activity. That said, it was a pretty desperate plea at the time, but to argue criminality is a little shady. But the story is that the Michigan Attorney General, who, by the way, was installed as Attorney General shortly before the 2020 election, and that by itself is suspicious. It might not be if we were talking about anywhere but Michigan was one of the four big states where it was a key state for the election decision, and there were some, shall we say, concerns. and I'll get back to that in just a minute. Michigan AG charges 16 GOP activists who falsely claimed to be electors in bid to aid Trump. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel walks to her seat before the State of the State address Wednesday. Oh, good, we got some flavor text. Michigan's Attorney General filed forgery and other felony charges Tuesday against 16 Republican activists who signed papers after the 2020 election, falsely indicating they were the duly appointed presidential electors of the state. Now, this forgery charge, that's interesting. Because what they, according to just this sentence, I think the forgery charge falls flat on its face. Because what this says is that they're being charged with forgery for signing papers that falsely indicated they were duly appointed presidential electors for the state. It's one thing to sign a paper that makes a particular claim. It does not here say that they drafted documents on which the information itself was claiming to be other than, right? There's not a charge here that they said, okay, here's a document where the governor of the state has said that we're the official electors. There's a whole lot of difference. What forgery essentially is creating the illusion that another party has made a claim, right? What it's being said that these people did, let's assume that there was absolutely no legitimacy or purpose or reasonableness to their claim of being electors, right? You know, if I say I'm the president of the United States of America right now, hell, I could type up a letter, draft a document, and that says I claim to be the president of the United States. That may be a false claim, but unless I've drafted the document in such a way that the document itself asserts that it is from a different authority from which it does not originate, then I have not forged anything. I have not created a document whose subterfuge includes the assertion of a non-existent original origin. Right? That's why take your laser printer and print a bunch of $100 bills. Right? You take the image of a $100 bill, you put it in a Photoshop, and you go in and you take a spot like where it says legal tender or in God we trust, or somewhere on there, you change the text on the document so that it says film prop only or something like that, right? You add a line that expresses the inauthenticity of the document, and suddenly the claim of the document has changed. And now what you have is a legitimate, useful prop for film or theater, which does not constitute the forgery of the item, because it changes the legitimacy claim of the item's documentational origin. So they're charging these people with forgery, and that just seems like a stretch to me. The case filed by Attorney General Dana Nessel, a Democrat, represents, surprise, surprise, represents the first criminal charges related to efforts by allies of former President Donald Trump to designate alternate slates of electors. The scheme would ultimately become the basis for Trump's last-ditch bid to remain in power, an effort to create a contest or crisis when Congress met to tally up the Electoral College votes and certified Joe Biden's victory on January 6, 2021. Now, we've detailed on this show many times before. Let's say for a moment, for the sake of argument, that the 2020 election was legitimate, that Biden actually won, right? That the United States legitimately saw an incumbent president win 10 million more votes than he won by originally, a feat never achieved before in U.S. history. And then, somehow, the opponent earned almost 10 million more than that. In an election where the total number of voters is higher, the total number of votes cast, rather, is higher than the total number of registered voters in the United States. Let's just go ahead and pretend for a moment that all that is perfectly reasonable, legitimate, and believable. And then let me ask you this question. Can a reasonable person who watched what happened during that election cycle, even assuming that it was that the election was perfectly fair and transparent, can a reasonable person say that there was nothing suspicious that occurred? Can a reasonable person look at all that evidence and say that the changing of laws without due process, without the changing of laws without the involvement of the legislature in several different states does not at least have the appearance of impropriety? Can a reasonable person look at the situation where the general election occurred and the results remained undeclared, in some cases for almost a month? Never before in history. The polls close, the votes are counted, and on the next day we know who the president is. Never in history. Right? The closest we've ever had to that is the declaration is made the next day, right? On the day after the election, we know who the election has chosen, who the people have elected. And then there's a legal challenge. And so there's a brief period of uncertainty, not as to who has won the election, but as to whether or not the legal challenge will bear merit. Right? Never before have they just said, we don't know who the winner is because we're still counting. And I cannot imagine looking at the situation and seeing, well, we don't know yet who the winner is because we're still counting. And then at the end of the process of counting, what you have counted in an election where the incumbent won by 10 million votes more than he previously won by, that somehow you're telling me that there were almost 40 million more Americans who voted. That doesn't math. So without even saying that the election was stolen, rigged, insecure, any of that, right? You can, for the sake of argument, assume that Biden was duly elected and still not be reasonably able to articulate a complete lack of concern or suspicion that something hinky was going on. Case in point, and this one in particular, let me switch that over to the reader panel so it looks better. There we go. Voter fraud in Michigan. Massive dump of over 200,000 ballots for Biden. And they say we saw this in Wisconsin, too. This is from the Gateway Pundit. Last night, President Trump was leading significantly in several swing states, including Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. President Trump had a sizable lead in Wisconsin and Michigan, but this morning, Sleepy Joe somehow took the lead. Overnight, Wisconsin had a huge dump of votes, all for Biden. Notice the blue line below. And you guys have probably seen this in the meme where they literally use this F spike to spell out the word fraud. Overnight, Joe Biden crept to a lead in Wisconsin, but one internet sleuth showed that this was possibly due to fraud. Now, this was almost immediately dismissed by officials in Michigan, saying, "Oh, this was a clerical error," and it was quickly corrected. I'm sorry. Now I have a serious question. If it was quickly corrected, then did this just go away? Because it didn't. It didn't just go away. right? So we're talking about Michigan, because it's the Michigan AG that's charging these electors with, apparently, forgery. And I just don't see a legitimate claim there. Let's not forget, when we're talking about Michigan, we're also talking about, Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer. We're talking about a state where the FBI conducted an obvious Fed sting, an obvious false flag sting, which has been proved in the courts to have been almost entirely an FBI activity, where the FBI went in and of the 18 or 19 people charged, like 12 or 13 of them were FBI agents or informants, and the other 4 or 5 people that were involved, as soon as they got into the courtroom, the court found no cause to charge them with anything substantial. They tried to charge them with attempted murder, and the recordings, the documents all showed that basically the FBI agents, informants, and assets kept trying to get these guys to agree, to at least say, "Oh yeah, we should totally kill the bitch," and they all said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! No, none of us are interested in that. We don't want to hurt anybody." Right? Oh, well, then we have to at least set the building on fire. We'll stick it to the man, show him what. Whoa! No. Nobody wants to do that shit. Okay, so they couldn't charge him with that, right? They tried to get some terrorism charges in there. No. Nobody wants to do any of that shit. Well, we should kidnap her and really make it. Whoa! Whoa. So, none of this is speculation anymore. Right, we might all reasonably been shouting "Fed" at Ray Epps outside, right? And there may be still some speculation there, but there's no speculation remaining around the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot as to the FBI's involvement. The only possible speculation that remains there is whether Gretchen Whitmer herself, who is a voracious Trump opponent, Trump antagonist, and antagonist of constitutional liberty generally, right? The only reasonable speculation that remains in the kidnapping case is whether or not Gretchen Whitmer herself was personally involved, because it is clear as it can be that the entire plot was one of several maneuvers by the federal government and the agents of basically the deep state, as crafted very carefully by Barack Obama, to create crises, artificially manufactured crises, for the purpose of discrediting Donald Trump and his supporters. The idea was, we're going to convince people that do nothing but watch CNN, or don't watch news, don't consume news, don't follow politics. We're gonna go after those Democrats that are on the fence, because even though they're Democrats, they don't like Joe Biden for a host of really reasonable reasons. And we're gonna go after those independents who are undecided. And please believe, before this election's over, I'm gonna do another show about fuck independents. Milk toast shitburgers, and we're gonna target these people with this propaganda and make them believe that being a Trump supporter, right? They don't have to believe it entirely. They just have to have that little mustard seed of doubt that being a Trump supporter means that you're pro-kidnapping, that you're pro-anti-government violence, that you're pro-assassination of political figures. When, of course, the record of history shows that it is the left. In fact, in quite recent memory, a Democrat activist was arrested in the course of attempting to assassinate a United States Supreme Court Justice, Brett Kavanaugh. These are the people that we're talking about as we go in. Steve says raises a black-pilled eyebrow. I hate to say it, man, but the more I see my government weaponized against the citizens of this country, the more accelerationist, the more I start to flirt with some accelerationist ideology. Maybe they've got a point. Now, Michigan was not the only state where there was a sudden, obvious dump of votes. It was just the one that was the most glaringly obvious. I mean, you know, they've got the little arrow here that seems to suggest you want to look at the difference between the two lines here. But the difference that you need to be looking at is the whole spread between, you know, it almost looks like the reverse of. It almost looks like the reverse of the Obama era unemployment numbers when they just conveniently dropped by 2% right before an election. That's some shady shit. So as we're talking about this kind of stuff, Tim Pool on Twitter says the framework being built is that Trump tried to start a civil war. They will use the insurrection to remove him from the ballot. And I wanted to bring that up because we've got an interesting. Here we go, live Dave 1. So I'm not entirely sure who you are, Dave, but apparently you're somebody. But he links to a couple of papers which cover there have been academic papers, and I'll go ahead and drop this link in the chat so you guys can go read them because we don't have time to read either of the papers in depth this morning. They're pretty dense. There's been academic papers written by constitutional scholars concluding that even if they succeed at convicting Trump under the Insurrection Act, that would not prevent him from running. Here's two such papers. No, 18 U.S.C. 2071 cannot disqualify Trump from the presidency. And what happens if the Biden administration prosecutes and convicts Donald Trump of violating 18 U.S.C. 2383? So these refer to two separate statutes. Two separate statutes that are key to the conversation about whether or not Trump can be removed from the ballot. And that's, I mean, we've covered it on the show. We've talked about it with Alex and them a couple times. Like, it could not be more obvious that what's happening is they're attempting to use lawfare to remove Donald Trump from the ballot because they just don't want him to run. Now, Alex says, effing Tim Pool and a Civil War boner. I gotta say, it doesn't look like he's all that wrong. We talk about the meme war on this show, and I think the facts are pretty clear. We are not currently in danger of entering a second civil war. We're there. It's happening. Now, it is primarily a cold propaganda war, but the fact is, we've already seen the war go hot a couple of times. The most obvious case is the situation with the 2020 Summer of Love, where essentially being a Democrat was the same as being an armed insurrectionist, actively engaged in the conduct of war against the United States of America for the majority of a full year. Everybody heard about the Chaz Chop, the Capitol Hill autonomous zone, and they're like, oh, there's this one crazy thing going on at Capitol Hill. Yeah, except there were several hundred of those. There were several hundred autonomous zones established all over the country. That was a thing that went dreadfully underreported. It happened in a lot of different places. There is one currently just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Steve asks if the war is now, was Ruby Ridge / Waco our Gulf of Tonkin? Damn, that's a whole conversation, Steve. But if you ain't working today, you might as well head on down to the farm. Tim would lose his shit if you showed up. But that's I'm gonna have to put a pin in that one for now. We'll have to have that conversation. But yeah, the fact is that we are currently engaged in an active, if not hot, civil war in this country. And it's one that has been intentionally crafted by a nefarious and entrenched government being weaponized against the people of the United States. And the political supporters of that, their moral baseline is pro-larceny. Their moral baseline is greed and selfishness and just pure hubris. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and put a pin in it right there about 3 minutes early this morning, and I'm gonna get these kids on the road. Thanks for watching this morning, guys. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.